Welcome back to Peace Over Performance. We are in part two of session three, talking about value and worth. Now, if you joined me in the last session, I was going really deep on worth because of just the events that happened in the world, just prompted me to get on here and spend some time with you to talk about how truly untouchable your worthiness and your worth is because you are created and loved by an eternal God that wants to be with you forever and loves you so much. And so that worthiness that is in you, that is bound to you, is totally 100% untouchable. What we're talking about today is about value and worth and peace and performance. And when your peace self is not in the picture, but your performance self is trying to do all the heavy lifting, and by doing all that heavy lifting in the world, the performance self inadvertently gives away our sense of worth. I know that worth and value, when we think about it in terms of just language, can be words interused together. One word can mean the other, but here's how we're going to define it for us, for you and me, in this peace over performance walk. Here's the words I want you to remember. Your worth is untouchable. Your value is what you make accessible. Your worth is untouchable. Your value is what you make accessible to others. No one can touch your worth, but you must architect your value, being that what is the value you want to bring to a relationship? What is the value that you're intending to receive in the way that you are giving what you're giving to the world? And what is the value you want to bring in every situation? Value is the thing that we have to use our performance self, which is responsible, determined, and achieving, to literally be a beautiful and amazing architect of the value that we're creating in circumstances, in situations that we come upon, in things that we intend to do in this world, in our careers, in our family, in every relationship we have. We are always in some way, intentionally or unintentionally, architecting value. But your performance self needs the peace self, because the peace self is the guardian of worthiness. In other words, worthiness is off the table. It cannot be impacted by situations where you are unable to connect the value you thought you could connect, or you didn't get the value out of something and the value is just not connecting. And instead of indicting your worth, it's saying, wow, my value is not connecting. Am I making my value truly accessible? Have I done my homework? Am I really prepared? What do I have to do to become really valuable in this situation, or really valuable to this person? And what value do we need to exchange? This is a way of thinking about it, but the worthiness is always, always, always off the table, in the sense of no one can touch that. Absolutely no one can touch that. Now, I want to bring a very practical thing that is a popular topic that occurs when we let our performance self try to run solo, and suddenly now we're giving away worthiness and not making value accessible, or not thinking about the value that needs to be created in a mutual situation. And here's a very practical thing, and it's essentially what I call like a performance self trap, where the performance self is trying to do everything, doesn't have the peace self in sight. And this is something that happens. And I know this very, very well. We become people pleasers, don't we? This is one of the things we do. We become people pleasers. And it's amazing, people pleasing has been something that has been written and researched for decades and decades and decades. There's so many books on it, and there's still new books coming out because it's just that big of a thing. It's because our performance self is just unable to do it all. If there's anything, the performance self can't do is he can't really navigate this value connection without the peace self that's protecting worthiness. Okay. So I took some notes. I wanted to provide some perspective for you on this. If you are at the expense of your own true, real personal boundaries, at the expense of how you're really feeling and what you're really thinking, you are heavily accommodating somebody else's or other people's needs. You just give them what they want, but you don't give yourself anything you want or need. And you depend in some way on approval of others. You really depend on that approval. Like you're really looking for them to validate you. Then you are certainly in a situation right there and then where your performance self is in a performance self trap of tendering your worthiness in a place where it shouldn't even be put out there, not even at all. So here's a question. Can you catch yourself in people pleasing mode? Can you do it? Um, Here's some signs. If you're saying yes to so many things and you more than 50% of what you're saying yes to is a no, or you're giving people pseudo yeses. In other words, there's yes with all these conditions, and then you have to suddenly pull out of stuff because you've overcommitted. Do you over explain? Do you over explain your situation to other people? Do you effectively set boundaries when you need to? Do you hide your real feelings and thoughts about things so you can make sure that you're not going to create a situation where that person's not going to approve of you? In other words, versus not approving of what the topic agreement is. In other words, we can have different views, we can have different agreements, but if I have my own thoughts and feelings about something, you might not approve of me as a human being. And so, therefore, I'm going to hide some stuff that's really important for me that I think about, but I'm not telling you what it is. Do you do these things? Because I have. All right. So, this is where the performance self gets into this sort of not acknowledging that the peace self has its worth bound and it is completely untouchable. The performance self now is out in the world running around trying to do too many things and making the heart of our worth available where it shouldn't be versus really connecting the value of the moment. So I want to teach you some terms that are coming from something that I've been using for a really long time. It's a Harrison assessment. I use it in my coaching practice. And at some point in one of our sessions, I'll talk a lot more about what the Harrison does, but it's a behavioral assessment. But there's these terms I want to introduce you to. And one is self-sacrificing, and the other is mutual help. Okay. So when we come into situations with our performance self running solo, giving up our worth when we shouldn't give up our worth, we are literally coming in a self-sacrificing mode. And it really um, causes so much trouble because we don't put our needs up front with people. So then they can be blindsided by what we really needed all along, but we never shared them. We can get ourselves where we are trying to help this person, but we're really only doing it in kind of a half-hearted way, unintentionally because we're overcommitted. Um, we can become quietly resentful, even though we are the ones that agreed to get involved. We can become quietly resentful that they're not understanding what we really need or what we're thinking or what we're really feeling because, well, we came in self-sacrificing. So the other term of mutual help is when we think about, okay, here's what I need. If I'm going to create value in this situation, here's what I need this person to do for me. Or we would come into the situation really being honest, brutally honest with ourselves. What is going on in my life right now? Do I really, truly have the time? Do I really, truly have the energy? Because when you're working from your peace self stance in mutual help, you know that your time and everybody else's time is super valuable because their worth is super valuable. So we protect ourselves to work more intentionally with every single thing we do. And the peace self needs the space to think about things up front before we involve ourselves in things. Because what we want to do is make sure that we're really well positioned from a mutual help standpoint to architect value and receive the value in helping the way we need to for all to be successful for everybody involved. And if we're not doing that, then we're really just trying to wing it, aren't we? And the performance self needs the help of the peace self to think this through and not be contending worth. Because if we're afraid to disappoint somebody, if we're afraid when we have to have these conversations where we have to say no, then that's a signal that the peace self is needed to step up and put these things forward. Okay, so let's talk about how you engage this peace self when we are in a people pleasing mode. So there's 5 things that will help us remedy the pitfalls and the performance self trap of self sacrificing and people pleasing and giving away our worth. Okay, here's the 5 things. The first one is a journal exercise, which is I want you to just write this out, is where do you give too much of you? Where do you just give way too much of you and uh, it's depleting? It's simply depleting. And just write it out. It could be a situation, it could be with another person, it could be you just give away all of yourself. And maybe you're thinking, well, this is just temporary for now, maybe I'll do that. But is that really the best thing to do? Is giving all of yourself away in that situation as people the best thing for you and for them? I just want you to think about that. Okay? Just so that you're aware where you're doing it. Okay, that's the first, just having the awareness of where it's happening. The second thing I want you to think about is whatever you're giving your time to today is creating who you will be tomorrow. So, whatever you're giving your time to today, the many, many, many things is going to accumulate and become your future self. So, if you engineer, reverse engineer and back up from your future self, are there things that you would do today differently to create whatever your future self is going to be? And how do those things fit into your picture? That's the second thing I want you to think about. That's just really, I mean, how powerful is that, right? Just thinking about that for a minute. The third thing is, and of course, this is written about in just about every time management um, book and every time management system you would ever come across, but every quality no that you put out there will exponentially increase the quality of your yeses. So a quality no will give you exponentially more powerful yeses because every time you're saying no, you're making space for yeses. And of course, this isn't new. This is something that's out there. People have talked about this, but just really think about it is, no is a way of kind of purging your life. No is the closet purge of your life. And yes is the stuff that fits, that is meant to be happening. And your yeses will be very meaningful, super powerful. The yeses will be places where then you can architect value, right? And not just come in and over deliver and overcommit. All right. The fourth thing is boundaries. And I continually revisit boundary material off and on throughout the years because, again, just like how we lose time, we do not consciously pay attention to boundaries. So there's two ways I want you to pay attention to boundaries. One is, what are boundaries right now in your life that have to be foundational to what is needed in your life right now? In other words, these realities are playing out in your life right now. There's things that are important to you. And because these things are important to you, these important things also come naturally with boundaries that you must put in place. For instance, what's super important to me right now is getting super, super healthy at levels maybe I haven't seen in a while for myself. Uh, just so, I mean, I've incorporated a ton of new routines and all kinds of things, but every time you're doing something that's important to you, it has to have its own set of boundaries that are fundamental to your life. In other words, no matter what else comes in my life, all of these things that come in my life, people or situations, they all have to be filtered through those boundaries that are honoring the thing that is most important to me. And think about that. That is amazing to think about because that is definitely the peace self saying, yes, your worth is untouchable. You have to take responsibility for architecting value. The other boundary category I want you to think about is situational boundaries, like boundaries because you're in a situation and the situation uniquely requires its own fitted boundaries. In other words, um, be it a family relationship, be it work situation, but there's a situation that's taking a lot of your attention. And if the situation is taking a lot of your energy, time, and attention, that situation also has a unique set of situational boundaries. And what are those? What are those? And then once you write them down, it's better to do that because then you can kind of adhere to them. And all of this stuff kind of I'm giving you kind of holds itself together. And the fifth and final thing, I just think the people that you have in your life that are the nucleus people, the people closest to you, that you share the most with, that you spend time with, that it's gratifying to be in these relationships or whatever, or maybe it's not, but I just want you to think about who's in your nucleus. I want you to be honest with being able to speak to them, not to push it on them, but to be able to show who you are, really who you are. Sometimes we're around people and we are in a weird, hard, difficult time right now where everybody's in this huge political divide. It's maybe messed up family relationships. There's all this controversy and tension and all these crazy things going on right now. But I want you to think about the fact that don't shut yourself down around the nucleus of people. If you cannot be you in the nucleus of people, that isn't honoring your worth. Okay. That's not honoring your worth. Find people in your life that appreciate what you value and where you're really at and who you really are. Make sure those people are in your nucleus, right? Make sure they're there because you need them and they need you. They need you to be honest and true about everything about you. Okay, those are the 5 things. I hope this was helpful today. It was so good to see you one more time in our final piece of our performance session 3 leg. And I will look forward to seeing you next time, guys. I can't wait to see you next time. I hope this was helpful. All right, take care.